Long before the name Dracula became a whisper of fear, it was a name of power. Nestled deep within the Carpathian Mountains, where fog never truly lifts and wolves sing to a moonless sky, there existed a land forgotten by God, but remembered by darkness. Transylvania, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was never a wall, merely a veil. The peasants knew. They had always known. They hung garlic above their doors, not as superstition, but as memory. A memory passed down through blood, quite literally. This is where our story begins, not with a monster, but with a man. Castle Bran, Castle Poenari, the fortresses of the Carpathians were not built for comfort, they were built for survival. Stone walls thick enough to silence screams, towers that scraped the underbelly of storm clouds. And within these walls, power was not inherited. It was seized. It was bled for. The man who would become Dracula was born into a world where violence was not the exception. It was the language of governance. Every stone of every castle told the same story. Those who rule do so through fear. And no one understood that lesson more deeply than the son of the dragon. His father's name was Vlad II, but the world knew him as Vlad Dracul. Dracul, the dragon. He was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order sworn to defend Christendom against the Ottoman tide. The dragon medallion he wore was not merely jewelry, it was a covenant, a promise written in the language of steel. And from this man, from this dragon, came a son. A boy who inherited not just the name, but the fire behind it. Dracula, son of the dragon, or as some would come to translate it, with a chill in their voice, son of the devil. From birth, his identity was already wrapped in myth. When Vlad was no older than 13, his father made a decision that would fracture the boy's soul. To secure a political alliance with the Ottoman Sultan, Vlad Dracul offered his two youngest sons as hostages, Vlad and his brother Radu. They were taken to the Ottoman court, far from the mountains they called home, far from everything familiar. For years, they lived as gilded prisoners. Radu adapted. He learned the Ottoman language, adopted their customs, and eventually became known as Radu the Handsome, a favorite of the Sultan himself. But Vlad watched, and Vlad remembered. Every day in captivity was a lesson in power and what happens to those who possess none. In the silence of his captivity, something transformed within the young prince. Some historians speak of trauma, others speak of brilliance sharpened by suffering. Perhaps both are true. He studied the Ottomans, their military formations, their psychology, their fears. He learned that an enemy understood is an enemy that can be defeated. He also learned something darker, that cruelty, when applied with precision, is the most effective weapon a ruler can possess. Not cruelty for its own sake, but cruelty as message, as theatre, as warning. The boy who entered those stone halls was a prince's son. The man who eventually walked out was something the world had not yet seen and was not prepared for. He returned to Wallachia not in triumph, but in shadow. His father had been assassinated. His older brother, Mircea, had been buried alive by political enemies. The throne of Wallachia, the prize his family had bled for, sat occupied by those who had destroyed his family. Vlad reclaimed it, lost it, reclaimed it again. The politics of 15th century Eastern Europe were a brutal game of shifting alliances, backstabbing nobles, and Ottoman pressure from the south. But each time Vlad was knocked down, he rose with a colder mind and a clearer vision of what he needed to become. He was learning the rules of a world without mercy, and he was preparing to rewrite them. When Vlad III finally secured the throne of Wallachia for the second time in 1456, he wasted no time. His first order of business was not diplomacy. It was a feast. He invited the noble boyars, the powerful families who had conspired against his father and brother, to a grand Easter celebration. They came dressed in their finest. They arrived with smiles, and Vlad, smiling back, had them arrested at the table. The elderly were impaled on the spot. The younger and stronger were marched miles away and forced to build his new castle with their bare hands until their fine clothes fell to rags and many fell dead. This was not madness. This was a message. The era of unchecked noble power was over. Vlad was in control. And then came the act that would echo through centuries and birth a legend: impalement. Vlad did not invent it. The Ottomans used it, and he had witnessed it firsthand as a child hostage, but no ruler in history employed it with such theatrical, deliberate intensity. He impaled criminals, Ottoman envoys, corrupt merchants, and enemies of the state. He arranged the bodies in patterns visible from miles away. When the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, the same man who had conquered Constantinople, marched into Wallachia, expecting a broken principality, he found instead a forest of 20,000 impaled Ottoman soldiers and prisoners arranged in a vast semicircle outside the capital. Even Mehmed, conqueror of empires, reportedly turned his army around. Let that image settle for a moment. The man who ended the Byzantine Empire, the Sultan who had brought the Eastern Roman legacy to its knees, turned back. Not by an army larger than his, Vlad's forces were vastly outnumbered, not by superior weapons, but by psychological warfare so extreme, so viscerally horrifying, that even seasoned warriors lost their nerve. Mehmed reportedly said he could not take the land from a man willing to do such things to defend it. This is the core of who Vlad was, a ruler who understood that fear, strategically deployed, could substitute for resources he didn't have. He was outnumbered, outfinanced, and surrounded by enemies. So he made himself into something his enemies could not rationalize, something beyond a man. Who was he, really? Behind the legend, behind the impaled forests and the blood-soaked throne, who was Vlad III, Dracula? Contemporary accounts describe a man of medium height with a cold, penetrating gaze and an intimidating presence that filled a room before he spoke a word. He was deeply religious, a defender of the Orthodox Christian faith, and saw himself not as a monster, but as a crusader. He genuinely believed that ruthlessness in service of order was not sin, but duty. He funded monasteries, he protected the poor from noble exploitation. In one famous account, he placed a golden cup at a public fountain, and it was never stolen, because everyone knew the price of theft under Vlad's law. Fear in his kingdom functioned as order. But history has two faces, and the other face of Vlad III is the one that crossed into myth. After his death, under circumstances still debated by historians, the stories began to shift. No longer just a ruthless prince, something else, something that did not stay dead. The vampire legend of Eastern Europe was ancient, predating Vlad by centuries. But when the Irish author Bram Stoker sat down in the late 19th century to write his Gothic masterpiece, he found in the name Dracula the perfect vessel for the darkness he was crafting. He borrowed the name, the location, the castle, the atmosphere, and he created something that the real Vlad could never have imagined: an immortal. Bram Stoker published Dracula in 1897. He spent years researching, reading accounts of Eastern European folklore, studying Transylvania, collecting notes on vampire myths from across cultures. He originally named his vampire Count Wampir, but when he encountered the name Dracula in a history book, something clicked. The name had gravity, it had history, it had teeth. The novel he produced was epistolary, told through journal entries, newspaper clippings, and letters, which gave it a disturbing sense of documentary realism. Readers in 1897 felt they were reading something true, something that had actually happened. And in a sense, perhaps they were right. Not about the vampire, but about the darkness within power that the novel was really exploring. Stoker's Count Dracula is not simply a monster, he is a metaphor, an ancient aristocratic power, literally feeding on the modern world, a force from the old continent infecting the rational, progressive society of Victorian England. The novel's heroes are modern men, a lawyer, a doctor, a scientist. They fight with telegrams and train schedules and medical knowledge, and yet against Dracula, patient, ancient, and utterly without moral constraint, they are nearly helpless. The novel touched a nerve in its era because it gave shape to a fear people couldn't quite name, that beneath the surface of civilization, older and hungrier forces were still very much alive. That progress was not protection. That the dark did not care about your modernity, London. The most modern city in the world at the turn of the 20th century, the heart of an empire, gas lamps and omnibuses and the London Underground. And into this world, Stoker placed his ancient predator, not in the wilderness where Gothic monsters belong, but in the city itself. Dracula does not wait in his castle for victims to come to him. He moves, he adapts. He purchases property in London, he plans. He is a monster who understands real estate. This detail, quietly terrifying, speaks to something deeper than supernatural horror. It speaks to the horror of an enemy who infiltrates, who mimics normalcy, who is already among you before you realize the danger. A fear as relevant now as it was in 1897. Against this force, one man stands with the knowledge to fight back. Professor Abraham Van Helsing, part scientist, part mystic, entirely relentless. He is the character Stoker uses to bridge the rational and the supernatural. Van Helsing takes the vampire seriously when everyone else reaches for a medical explanation. And in doing so, he represents something the novel quietly argues. That wisdom sometimes requires abandoning the comfortable assumption that the world makes sense. That to defeat the darkness, you must first be willing to acknowledge it exists. Van Helsing became so iconic that he outlasted the novel itself, appearing in over 100 adaptations, sequels, films, and television series. The vampire hunter as archetype, as enduring as the vampire itself. The powers of Dracula, as Stoker wrote them, have become so embedded in popular culture that we forget how carefully constructed they were. He commands wolves and rats. He transforms into mist, into bats, into a large dog. He can hypnotize with a glance. He casts no reflection. He cannot cross running water uninvited. He sleeps in earth from his homeland. Each power is matched by a specific vulnerability: garlic, holy symbols, sunlight, a stake through the heart. This balance was deliberate. Stoker wanted a creature nearly unstoppable, but not quite. A monster that could be defeated, but only by those willing to sacrifice everything. The rules of the vampire became the grammar of an entirely new genre of horror that would define literature and cinema for the next 100 years. The vampire left the page and entered the screen almost immediately. In 1922, the German expressionist film Nosferatu gave Dracula his first cinematic life, unauthorized and so distinct they changed the name to Count Orlok. The film was so visually disturbing that Stoker's widow sued for copyright infringement and won, with courts ordering all copies destroyed. But prints survived. And the image of Count Orlok, bald, rat-like, with impossibly long fingers casting a shadow up a staircase, became one of the most iconic images in cinema history. Horror had found its visual language, shadow, implication. The shape of evil suggested rather than shown. Every horror film made since owes something to that staircase, that shadow, those terrible hands. From that shadow, an empire of myth grew. Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, Gary Oldman, Claes Bang. Each generation reimagined the Count through its own fears and fascinations. Sometimes he is seduction, the dangerous stranger who offers immortality and asks only for surrender. Sometimes he is tragedy, the man cursed by his own power, unable to die, unable to truly live. Sometimes he is pure predator, cold, ancient, and utterly without remorse. He has been comedy, and he has been terror. He has sold breakfast cereal to children and haunted the nightmares of adults. No fictional monster has proven more adaptable, more resonant, more persistently fascinating, because he is not really about vampires. He never was. At his core, Dracula endures because he represents something true about power, about mortality, and about desire. We fear death, and here is a creature that has defeated it. We resent those with power over us, and here is a being of absolute, unchallengeable dominion. We are drawn to beauty, to mystery, to the forbidden, and here is all three, wrapped in a black cape and an accent. The vampire is a mirror. What we see in it changes with who we are and when we look. In times of social anxiety, he is the outsider corrupting society. In times of repression, he is forbidden desire walking openly through the night. He is always us, the parts of us we dare not name in daylight. And so the story does not end. It cannot, because Dracula, both the historical prince of impalement and the immortal creature of Stoker's imagination, has become something beyond story. He is mythology. He is a shape that fear takes when it needs a face. The mountains of Transylvania still rise above the clouds. The old castles still stand. And somewhere, in the long tradition of human darkness and human longing, the Count endures, patient as he has always been, waiting. Because monsters born from truth do not die easily, and some doors, once opened, never fully close. Thank you for watching. If the darkness intrigued you, the story continues. It always continues.